It really happened to me by accident. I grew up listening to hip hop, and I grew up, my mom, my parents. I grew up in a Christian home, like phenomenal parents, but they wouldn't let me even listen to the Backstreet Boys, so I had to settle for the Christian rappers until I was old enough to sneak it in the basement. And so I grew up listening to guys like
Toby Mac.
John Rubin. No, not Toby Mac. I'm sorry. For those of you who love Toby Mac, that's great, but I'm not gonna. What am I doing bashing this guy? Anyway, so I grew up, and a bunch of stuff happened to me while I was growing up. I went through a lot of really intense, difficult moments, and because of that, I began to question kind of everything, and I began to search for answers outside of the church and outside of the person of Jesus Christ, because I had, I guess, never experienced Him for myself. And everything that happened in my life had me wondering, like, God, like, where are you? Are you real? And so what happened was I wound up sort of becoming a tourist through religion land, and I dabbled in multiple different, religions, and I got involved with the occult for a short period of time, and I got really into philosophy. I got really into guys like Voltaire and Socrates and all these dudes who were powerful thinkers in their own right, but the hope for humanity does not rest in the words that come out of their mouth. And it took me a while to realize that the hope for humanity rests in the person of Jesus Christ. That the hope for every morning, the hope for every night, and the hope, how does it go? It's like faith is like the hope of things to come and the evidence of things unseen. And that really has become something that I guess, I'm down with. And so anyways, what wound up happening was the first poem that I'm going to do is the first poem that I ever wrote. I got some newer stuff for you, but what happened was I wound up I wound up dabbling in Buddhism. I wound up dabbling in the occult. I started reading books on spiritual poetry by these guys who were brilliant, but ultimately they were missing the mark. And I wound up also engaging in, like, I just became, I guess you could call it, a sexual deviant, and I wound up dealing with, I essentially became a spiritual hedonist, if that makes any sort of sense, anything to, and so I got lost in that, and I went backpacking through the Okanagan, and I hit the lowest point that I've ever hit in my life, and I was carrying all of this garbage with me. I was carrying all of these ideas and all these beliefs that did not lead to hope, but led to death. But it was like I was carrying them like a cloak. And I fell so low, and I came back home. I was crazy depressed. And on September 10th, 2011, I wound up rededicating my life to Christ. And I'd grown up, writing poetry and reading poetry. But I never imagined that I'd actually start writing it, I never imagined that I'd start writing it, like, with purpose, with something behind it. I always just figured it was something to dabble in. Until one day, I was working on a construction site, and out of nowhere, this line just popped into my head. And it was, "He went to war with death and gave his life in the process." And I was like, that's weird. Okay, whatever. I'm working and I'm walking around. Like 10 seconds later, it's like, "Perfect love and no less drove death from the whole mess." And I'm like, okay, what the heck is going on? Oh, whatever. I'll keep doing. And it's like, not a moment of weakness, not a second of hesitation. And I was like, okay, hold on one sec. I gotta go to the washroom. So I ran to the porta-john, pulled out my iPod Touch, and wrote this poem down in about, 2 minutes. And this is what started it all. "He went to war with death and gave his life in the process. Perfect love and no less drove death from the whole mess. Not a moment of weakness, not a second of hesitation. Straight to the cross to save the lost of his chosen generation. So I raise my voice in veneration, pump the breath from my chest. A yard from the gates of hell, I stand and yell, God be blessed. Worthy is the Lamb, 'cause were he just a man, I wouldn't be here. I'd be stuck with my worthless head in the sand. And I know what Voltaire said about the absurdity of certainty. 'Cause it's certainly absurd that God would send his son to earth for me to save me for eternity. And I know that he said what he meant when he said that one day he'd return for me. So I post up, draw my line in the sand, and stand on the rock. With his word in my hand, I trust in his plan, and I plant crops. I can't stop. I rep the way, the truth, the life. I'm living proof. So poof, truth, the lies vanish out of sight. Sin can't stand beneath his might. Darkness vanquished by the light, because it can't understand the simple truth of Jesus Christ. See, my faith is in he who's even bigger than existence. He who holds all together heals the sickest of their sickness. God came as a man, and that's an actual fact. Now that causes one to wonder, where's the rationale at? Because it doesn't make any sense why Christ stepped down from his throne to hit the dust in search of us in hopes of bringing us home. See, he's invited the liars, rapists, murderers, and thieves. Now what king would dare populate his kingdom with these? You see, the answer is simple. But we search heaven above, earth and heaven above, for what's been there the whole time. Unconditional love. Now let me lay it out in plain sight so you're feeling my vibe. My God is powerful, loving, and my God is alive.